power of being able to put things into action. I asked him about, what advice he might give to Sir Keir Starmer today, and he was saying, well, it's quite a hard lesson, really, which is that you need to have power in the first place in order to show people what you can do. And that's all about convincing people that you have the right strategy and the right plans. And our colleague in Cardiff, Ione Wells, who's spoken to Mr Drakeford recently as well, joins us now. Ione, just in that interview we did with him, and then he was asked by Kirsty about, potentially questions around mandates for referenda on independence, etc. What did you make of all that?
Well, I think it was really interesting to hear him say there, as you've discussed, he was asked about kind of whether or not he believes that if a pro-independence party was given a majority in Scotland, then they would have a mandate. And he said, Mark Drakeford's always been a man who's stuck to his principles, really, and he's always said that if a pro-independence party had got a majority in Wales, then they would have a mandate for independence, but was very clear that that has not happened this time around. But one thing that's really interesting is that, kind of rewind back to Monday, we spoke to Mark Drakeford and asked him, what if a majority of MSs that are elected in the Senedd are pro-more devolution, which is something that Labour are in favour of, and also something that, of course, Plaid Cymru are in favour of as well. And he was surprisingly frank about this at the time. He basically said, yes, there would be a mandate, if that's the case, for more powers for the Senedd. Now, that has actually happened. So it's going to be really interesting to see sort of what he does with this, because I spoke to the Prime Minister on Monday when he was campaigning in the Vale of Glamorgan and put that to him, asking him what he made of the idea that if the majority of MSs elected to the Senedd were in favour of more devolution, would that be something that the UK government would be willing to negotiate with the next Welsh government? And he kind of dismissed this at the time, basically saying that people in Wales don't care about more powers, don't care about more politicians, they just care about jobs and the economy and the health recovery. That argument might now be a little bit harder to make, because obviously we have now seen the majority of MSs elected to the Senedd in favour of more devolution. The question is going to be, what does Mark Drakeford do with that mandate, and what kind of leverage will he have in Westminster, if any, at the moment, to try and make some of those arguments? It's certainly something, though, that we know that Plaid Cymru are really going to be keen to hold Labour to account for in opposition in the Senedd.
That's a fascinating prospect, Ione. The other thing I wanted to ask you was, now that, because we've got all the Welsh results in and we know what the shape of the Senedd is going to be, the dust is beginning to settle. So how do you see the picture now? You've given us the sense there of Mark Drakeford and maybe one of the challenges ahead of him. The other parties, let's say Conservative and Plaid Cymru in this instance, because they've got most of the other seats, how are they feeling today?
Well, I think if we start with the Welsh Conservatives, I think they're encouraged by the fact that they've made 6 gains in this election. They've got their best ever result in a Welsh election, so they are encouraged by that. Of course, they haven't got some of the gains that they were hoping for. For example, in the North East, they were perhaps hoping to pick up a couple more than just Vale of Clwyd, which was won on a pretty slim majority. So in terms of how they're feeling in the sort of long term, I think, it's difficult to say at this stage what their kind of long-term game plan really is in Wales. They have made gains, as I've discussed, still far off getting near Labour's, chipping really away at Labour's 2 big red walls in Wales, which of course in Wales isn't just the North East, it's also the South East as well. But interestingly, on a UK government level here, I've spoken to UK government sources about this. They're encouraged primarily by the fact that they have overtaken Plaid Cymru into 2nd place now in the Senedd. They're also encouraged by the fact that they claim that the sort of nationalist surge didn't really materialise in the election. And that brings us on, obviously, to Plaid Cymru here. Now, it's fair to say that this is a disappointing election for Plaid Cymru. They were hoping to make more gains away from their kind of traditional West Wales, Welsh-speaking heartlands in this election. So there are going to be big questions now for the party of kind of what went wrong. Yesterday, Adam Price, their leader, was pretty buoyant, still very optimistic about the fact that their independence cause was a net gain for them, optimistic about his leadership as well. But there will be questions for them, certainly because in the campaign they were really pointing to those polls suggesting rising support for independence in Wales, pointing to those grassroots movements like Yes Cymru that had gained momentum over the last year. They were saying that that was a strong argument for them. What's happened, though, is that doesn't seem to have translated into more votes for Plaid Cymru. So that's the kind of question that they're going to be really grappling with, I think, over the next couple of months and looking further into the future as well.